dinghy over here. Some locals paddled from downwind. Took them frickin' ages. And they made it up here. I thought they were coming to see us, or a boat in the bay. But no, they anchored in the middle of everyone and each put a line in the water. Commitment. Here we are in Luganville, in the anchorage closest town, but she's a bit rolly, so we're going to go and get a mooring over at Aore Island just before Dad turns up tomorrow, so we're about to move. This tug's on the move. Ship coming to the bay. Looking at the name, can't help but think it's an ex-New Zealand boat. Right, who's just aboard? Hitching the lines. So we're now off Aore Island on Aore Adventure Sports, their moorings, which are very good moorings. They service them regularly, and some of them are the ex-moorings for some of the ships that used to come in here during World War II. It's mostly expats that live on the island, and there's some beautiful homes and beautiful beaches here. It's really sheltered too from the prevailing trade winds, which is a southeasterly, so beautiful side here. Dad turns up today, so we're going to go and pick him up shortly, and we're going to spend a few days diving the President Coleridge, which is an enormous ship that sank. It hit its own mine and sank, but we'll tell you all about that later. There's going to be a little bit of diving at the end on the Coleridge, but most of it's going to be another video, so watch out for that one, but I'll give you a taste at the end of this one. Santo was a major base for the Americans during World War II. It served as a supply troop and airfield base for the attacks on Japan in the Solomons and the various other islands during World War II. So I'm going to do my best to give you a bit of an overview of Santo's role in the war during this video, so that's all coming up shortly. So I've just picked up Dad, and turns out it's Luganville Day today. So there was a major event going on in the big park, and the entire park was lined with these stalls. We were there quite early in the day, but it definitely went on all to the night. I think I remember hearing them at 2 AM from over on Aore Island, which is 1.5 kilometres away. Check out the Land Cruisers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Granddad's first Vanuatu carver. Right, come on, down the hatch. Maluk. You beat me. Bars around here. All of those are all bars. Choose which one you. We chose this one. That's where we drank from. The dinghy was tied up at Smuggler's Restaurant dock, so we figured we'd better have dinner there. And this is Fran's $40 lobster meal, which was epic. So a little history on Santo now. Back in World War II, the Allies needed a base closer to the Solomons as Japan was getting closer and closer to Australia and New Zealand, and they needed to stop the advancement. The Americans came to Santo and built a base on Santo. It was called the Naval Advance Base, Espirito Santo, but we'll just call it Santo. It was a major advance base that the Seabees built. They were a US Naval Construction Battalion. They consisted of 258,000 men, which was founded in 1942. They only lost 8 men during the construction phases. They were the highest paid group in the US military because a lot of them came from well qualified backgrounds in construction. They had to build airfields, piers, administration, fuel bunkers, supply depots, hospitals, barracks, mess halls, roads, water supplies, R&R areas, floating docks, sewer systems, electricity systems. They also built things like theatres, and they'd done it all with very little resources, often making their own, e.g. Corrugated iron. They couldn't get it in, so they had to make corrugated iron, all in a very short time frame and under a lot of pressure, and they'd work day and night and just to get the job done. So their first objective was to get the airstrips built. They were given just 20 days to construct a 1.9 kilometre runway that had to be cut through the jungle, cleared, levelled and surfaced with coral. On July the 28th, 1942, the first fighter squadron landed and was followed by the next day by a squadron of B-17 bombers. The aircraft were fueled from drums. August the 11th, so a week and a half later, the 7th Battalion arrived and immediately began construction on a more extensive air facilities to support the Guadalcanal campaign. In 60 days they completed a second fighter strip, 1.3 kilometres long, 52 metres wide, with 2.2 kilometres of taxiways. With fighter facilities complete, the Seabees turned their attention to the bomber facilities. So following the completion of the fighter strip at Turtle Bay, the 7th Battalion, which is a division of the Seabees, constructed an airfield called the Bomber Field Number 1. It was 1.5 kilometres long, 46 metres wide. It was made of Marsden matting on an 8-inch coral base. Following on from that came Bomber Field Number 2 at Pekawa, was begun by the 7th Battalion. It was also taken over by the 15th, who completed the construction of the 2.2 kilometre runway. And it's this airfield that has now become the Luganville airfield that's in use today. In addition to the construction of the runway, the taxiways extensive construction was undertaken to support hospitals, including 100 huts, warehouses, quarters, wards, laboratories, surgeries, and other medical facilities, which were vital following the Guadalcanal campaign in late 1942. Following on for that came Bomber Field Number 3, with Santo becoming such a vital staging point for bomber operations in the southwest Pacific. The 40th Battalion were tasked with constructing a third bomber field at Luganville, a runway 2 kilometres long and 91 metres wide, 8.2 kilometres of taxiway, 75 hard stands, and it was all cut out of dense jungle, and incredibly was completed in 120 days. Nearly 25% of the runway was solid cut coral, ranging from a metre to 10 metres deep. Due to heavy rainfall on Santo, the surface of the coral was also treated with an emulsified asphalt binder to prevent it from being washed away. So Santo was not only for aircraft, it was also for the ships, the supply ships, the battleships, aircraft carriers. So of all the remarkable naval vessels to find a home in the waters surrounding Santo during World War II, none came close to the complexity and sheer size of the floating dry dock, USS ABSD-1. This incredible piece of marine machining infrastructure was more than big. In fact, its overall area was almost equal in size to that of 18 Olympic swimming pools. With Santo established as the largest naval base outside Hawaii, its role in the giant Pacific theatre maintenance and repair saw it repair everything from the smallest tenders to the largest battleships. While the majority of the repairs were undertaken while the ships were tied up at port, major repairs, maintenance and refits could only be done when the ships were out of the water, in dry dock. And if emergency repairs were required, the repair crews based on Santo just had to make do. That was until ABSD-1 and 2 smaller floating dry docks arrived in Vanuatu. They were towed there in sections from the United States. Then the sections were welded together on site. So there were 3 dry docks. The largest of these was designed for aircraft carriers, battleships and the larger auxiliary ships, and they were made up by 10 sections, and each section was 78 metres long and 24 metres wide, and each having a lifting capacity of 10,000 tonnes. When the 10 sections were welded together side by side, it measured 282 metres long and 78 metres wide, and a lifting capacity of an enormous 90,000 tonnes. The hulls of each section would be flooded with water. The whole structure would sink. The ship would drive on. The water is then pumped out of all of those hulls and it lifts up, bringing the vessel out of the water. Aore Island lies opposite Santo on the other side of the Seagon Channel. During World War II, it was the site of many activities in support of the US Navy. There was a massive ammunition storage area on the island, as well as an area for the assembly of sea mines. Huge fuel and water storage tanks were also built on the north side of the island facing Luganville. But of all the establishments on the island, by far the favourite was the Fleet Recreational Centre. Here the personnel stationed not only on Santo but throughout the Pacific region could come and relax. In addition to the swimming beach, soda fountain and beer parlour, 9 softball diamonds, 1 hardball diamond, 3 tennis courts, 4 volleyball courts, 3 basketball courts, 1 football and soccer field, 3 boxing rings, 8 handball courts and a theatre district. Several baseball and basketball leagues operated in the island, and track and field and boxing matches occurred regularly. The Navy also laid out a golf course used principally by its officers. At the conclusion of World War II, the roads, buildings, power, water and other support infrastructure built by the American Army were to be left in place as a gesture of goodwill for the people of Santo. However, all the thousands of pieces of equipment and vehicles and clothing, furniture, stores, even crockery and cutlery and thousands of bottles of Coca-Cola were to be shipped back to the United States, but so did the troops. With transport ships in short supply at the end of the war, the decision was made to give priority to the troops and leave the equipment behind. Additionally, the War Department felt that a flood of surplus military trucks and tractors and bulldozers and other vehicles arriving back in the US would do nothing to reinvigorate the economy if everyone was buying up surplus used equipment from the army. So all the equipment was destined to stay on Santo. The French, who were controlling the area of Vanuatu at the time, got wind of the decision and saw an opportunity to acquire the equipment for free. The Americans offered everything at 6 cents in the dollar, but the French believed they would get it for nothing anyway following the Americans' withdrawal, and they refused the offer. So the Americans weren't too impressed with France's rejection of what they considered a very generous offer, but they knew the French were looking to exploit the whole situation. So in a decision of pure spite, and some would say complete madness, the Americans decided that if the French wouldn't pay, then no one would have the equipment. For 2 solid days, every piece of surplus equipment on Santo was transported down to the beach, not far from Luganville, and dumped into the sea. What couldn't be driven into the ocean under its own power was pushed there by a bulldozer. Before the bulldozers themselves were driven in with rocks keeping the accelerators flat to the floor. As a final gesture of goodwill, the Army engineers blew up the temporary jetty that the Army engineers had constructed that the trucks were driven off. Millions of dollars of equipment and stores were destroyed, and a new name was given to the area of Santo coastline. So that's it for the history lesson. Hopefully you didn't get too bored and found it interesting. It was just a small snippet really of what's around here, and doing my research, and there's some great websites and interactive maps of the area, and the amount you can learn and the amount of time it takes to do the research absolutely blew my mind. There's so much information, it's great, love it. Anyway, all this footage here obviously of $1 Million Point I've taken myself when we scuba dived the spot. And I must give a shout out to the South Pacific World War II Museum here in Luganville. A lot of the information and images came from their website. From my own experience, this place is incredible. It's what you can't see, and what I couldn't see but I could understand, because you can see the sheer size of it. Is all we're seeing here is the outside of the pile. The pile is enormous. It just blows your mind. Anyway, you're probably sick of me talking, so I'll give you a couple of minutes of music to overlay on this video.
He was a famous trumpet man from out Chicago way. He had a boogie style that no one else could play. He was the top man at his craft, but then his number came up and he was gone with the draft. He's in the army now, a blowin' reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. They made him blow a bugle for his Uncle Sam. It really brought him down because he couldn't jam. The captain seemed to understand, because the next day the cap went out and drafted a band. And now the company jumps when he plays reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. A toot, a toot, a toot-a-toot, a toot, he blows it eight to the bar. In boogie rhythm, he can't blow a note unless the bass and guitar is playing with him. He makes a company jump when he plays reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. He was a boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. And when he plays boogie woogie bugle, he was busy as a bzz bee. And when he plays, he makes the company jump eight to the bar. He's a boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. Do 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 da da do da da do do. He blows it eight to the bar. He can't blow a note if the bass and guitar isn't with him. And the company jumps when he plays reveille. He's a boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B.
So I hope you enjoyed the 5 things I picked on, being the CBs, the airstrips, the dry docks, Aore Island and $1 Million Point. But there are a lot of other things that went on here. Just think of what it takes to house, feed, train, have medical facilities for the 500,000 people that came through here, and the 9 million tons of equipment. Anyway, it's time to go. We've got to move on. We haven't touched on the USS President Coleridge yet, but that will come up in the next video, so keep an eye out for that. They'll have a dedicated video for that one. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. See you in the next one.